The late afternoon sun slanted through the vast picture windows of the Sterling family's grand estate in Buckhead, Atlanta, but it did little to dispel the inherent coldness of the enormous living room. Zendaya Amari Vance was on her knees on the flawless marble floor, meticulously wiping away the last smudge. Her long dark hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and her rough, worn work clothes made her look completely out of place amid the surrounding luxury. She appeared more like a hired maid than Mrs. Sterling, the lady of the house. Crash! A sharp, jarring sound echoed through the room. A costly, fine porcelain teacup shattered right beside Zendaya's hand. Sharp fragments scattered, one slicing the back of her hand, leaving a track of vivid red blood. Zendaya froze, but did not lift her head. Seated on a designer sofa, Diane Cleo Sterling, her mother-in-law, watched her with crossed arms and a gaze as sharp as a razor. "What on earth are you doing? You don't even know how to properly clean the floor, or are you so ignorant that you didn't see I was having tea?" Zendaya remained silent. The hand holding the cleaning cloth clenched tight. She collected the pieces, trying to keep her blood from staining the stone. "Useless." Diahan's voice was laced with pure contempt. "Clean it again, and clean it until I decide it's clean." Zendaya merely nodded. She quietly went for a dustpan and a fresh cloth. 3 years of marriage, and she was already accustomed to this. The humiliation, the insults, the sheer disdain. At that moment, the roar of a sports car engine sounded outside the gate, and the front door opened. Jamal Orion Sterling strode in. He was wearing an impeccable, custom-tailored suit, his figure tall and his face handsome but cold. He was the CEO of the Sterling Group, the man everyone in Atlanta admired. He glanced at the living room, his eyes passing over Zendaya, kneeling on the floor, and the porcelain shards, as if she were simply air, an inanimate, decorative object. He did not even frown. "Jamal, my son, you're home." Diahan's expression instantly switched from severe to beaming. "Come here. Mama had your favorite seafood gumbo prepared." Jamal shook his head and walked straight to the bar, pouring himself a glass of whiskey. He never looked at Zendaya even once. "Mother, I can't stay for dinner." He tossed the whiskey back in a single gulp. "Kiana needs me." Zendaya's body tensed. Her hand, wiping the floor, paused for a moment. Kiana Sorrell, his beautiful and talented executive assistant, the woman the entire Sterling family, except for Zendaya, adored. Diahan looked sideways at Zendaya. "Well," she sighed, her voice heavy with implication, "you really should sort that out once and for all. Our family can't remain without an heir." She spoke loudly on purpose. "Look at that ignorant fool. She can't even hold a pregnancy, and worse, she's illiterate. If it weren't for old grandfather Theron forcing you before he passed, how could our family have brought this trash in to stain the house?" Every word was like a thorn piercing Zendaya's heart. Illiterate was the label Jamal Sterling had slapped on her since the first day she stepped into this house. 3 years earlier, Jamal's grandfather, Grandfather Theron, who had saved her life and her family's during a flash flood in their small community outside Columbia, South Carolina, made Jamal marry her. On his deathbed, he took her hand and told her that Jamal wasn't a bad person, only asking her to be patient. He was wrong. Jamal said nothing more. He turned, adjusted his shirt collar, and walked out. He came and went like a cold gust of wind, never stopping for her. The car engine roared again and then faded into the distance. In the massive living room, only Diahan and Zendaya remained. "What are you standing there for, you poor excuse?" Diahan yelled. "Go up to your room. Just looking at you gets on my nerves." Zendaya lowered her head, her hands clenching the cloth so tightly her knuckles turned white. She rose, silently cleaned the shards and the floor, and then headed for the service staircase leading to her cold attic room. She had been married for 3 years, living like a servant, an invisible shadow in her own home. in a setting completely opposite to the Sterling mansion, at the most luxurious restaurant in Atlanta, with a panoramic view of the illuminated downtown skyline. The soft sound of a violin blended with the clinking of crystal glasses. Jamal Sterling carefully cut the filet mignon on his plate. Across from him sat Kiana Sorrell. She wore a deep burgundy silk dress that accentuated her light skin and curvy figure. Her wavy hair fell softly, and her face was expertly made up. She was the epitome of the modern, successful woman any man would desire. Kiana set down her fork, her beautiful eyes covered by a fine mist, her voice full of remorse. "Jamal," she whispered softly, "I've bothered you again today. I know you should be home with Zendaya, but I was just so scared." Jamal looked up, and the coldness he wore at home instantly melted, replaced by an unusual tenderness. "What nonsense is that? You had a nightmare. Of course you should call me." "But," Kiana bit her lip, "I'm afraid your mother will make things difficult for Zendaya. When you called earlier, her voice didn't sound very happy." She sighed like a fragile flower in the wind. "I feel sorry for her. She was used to living in the country. Coming to a city like Atlanta can't be easy. And since she can't read or write, she can't even communicate. She must feel so lonely." Jamal laughed coldly, the tenderness vanishing as soon as Zendaya's name was mentioned. "Pity her? Please. A country girl who, thanks to my grandfather, gets to wear silk. Securing the position of Mrs. Sterling is the luckiest break of her life. She should be grateful instead of walking around with that funeral face every day." He looked at Kiana, his gaze tender once more. He pulled a dark blue velvet box from his jacket pocket. "This is for you." Kiana covered her mouth, her eyes wide with surprise. Inside, a diamond necklace sparkled, featuring a heart-shaped pendant with an extremely rare pink diamond. "Kiana, this is the heart of the Atlantic," Jamal said, his voice full of affection. "I picked it up at an auction in London last month. Only you deserve things like this." Kiana stood, walked around the table, and personally fastened the necklace. His cold skin brushed the back of her neck, making her shiver slightly. She turned, wrapped her arms around his neck, her gaze passionate. "Jamal, you're so good to me." Her breath, scented with expensive perfume, brushed his face. "But I'm scared." "Scared of what?" he asked, pulling her close by the waist. "I'm scared that we'll go on like this forever. I love you, but I don't want to be the other woman eternally. I want to be with you openly." Kiana looked at him, her eyes welling with tears. "So when can I officially be your wife, Jamal?" Her question struck the frustration Jamal was hiding. Yes, Zendaya Vance, the thorn in his side, his greatest obstacle. He hated her existence, he hated her silence, he hated her humble origins and her ignorance. If it weren't for the 20% of shares his grandfather had placed in her name in a trust, he would have kicked her out of the Sterling family long ago. But now, the Sterling Group was in trouble. Jamal released Kiana and returned to his seat. He looked at the brilliant lights outside the window. Kiana sensed the change immediately. She sat down. Instead of pressing him, she switched to a concerned tone. "The company is having problems again, isn't it? That European project?" Jamal nodded. "We have a liquidity problem. That old fool, Mr. Preston Hayes on the board, is pushing to see the books." Kiana frowned. She wasn't just a pretty face. "Jamal, what if we use Zendaya's shares?" Jamal's eyes darkened. "Those shares are locked up in my grandfather's trust. They only take effect if she voluntarily signs the transfer." Kiana smiled, a knowing smile full of unspoken meaning that Jamal didn't perceive. "Have you forgotten?" she said softly. "She can't read or write." The attic room was cold and empty. It was the complete opposite of the luxury downstairs. There were no wool rugs or mahogany furniture, just a hard twin bed and an old desk. This had been Zendaya Vance's world for the past 3 years. She silently closed the thin wooden door and slid the bolt. The dry click of the latch echoed like a switch separating two worlds. The moment the door closed, Zendaya's submissive, frightened appearance vanished. Her back, previously slightly stooped in resignation, straightened. Her eyes, always lowered and elusive, lifted. In the darkness, they were sharp and cold as ice. She went under the bed and pulled out a metal briefcase, carefully secured with a code. She opened it. Inside wasn't country clothing, but a customized military-grade security laptop, a Scap-100, a model that couldn't be bought with money. Zendaya sat at the desk and booted the computer. The screen didn't show the usual Windows or macOS interface, but a proprietary encrypted operating system. After 3 layers of complex passwords and retinal verification, the main screen lit up. It wasn't covered in shopping websites or entertainment. The entire screen was covered in complex graphs, running algorithms, and global stock market data updated every nanosecond. She accessed an end-to-end encrypted email system. The inbox instantly filled with a series of unread emails. Subject: JPM Ariadna. We need your opinion on the Federal Reserve's upcoming bond issuance. Subject: FMA. Ariadna, the $500 billion rescue package you predicted has failed. The London market is chaos. Subject: TR. Ariadna, we don't understand your model. How did you know the Norwegian sovereign fund was going to divest? Ariadna, a mythical name in the clandestine financial world. She was a living legend, a mysterious analyst who had never revealed her face, someone who accurately predicted the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008 when she was just a teenager, and who warned about the 2024 tech bubble. All this charade was for a promise. Zendaya opened a hidden file. It was the only photograph she kept of herself with an older, kind-looking man. Grandfather Theron Sterling, the man who had saved her life and her family's in that tragic flood years ago. On his deathbed, he didn't call Jamal, he called her. Zendaya held his hand, his breath weak. I'm sorry, I haven't raised Jamal well. Arrogance and prejudice have blinded him. He doesn't see your worth. Wall Street would pay hundreds of millions of dollars just to know Ariadna's identity. They could never imagine that the Ariadna they were searching for was the illiterate wife, Zendaya Vance, living in an attic of the Sterling family's Buckhead estate. Not only did she know how to read and write, but she had graduated summa cum laude with a double major in applied mathematics from Harvard and quantitative finance from MIT. She was fluent in 7 languages, not 5. If he betrays you, Zendaya, you owe him nothing. Use that sword and the 30% of shares I secretly left you in another trust, and take back everything that is yours. Show no mercy. 3 years had passed. She had given him countless opportunities, but in return, she had only received humiliation, coldness, and the mention of Kiana. Zendaya returned to the screen, opening another window monitoring the Sterling Group stock. It was plummeting. She clearly saw Jamal's poor investment decisions. He had been overly confident trying to enter the European biotechnology market without proper preparation. The group's liquidity was running out. In just 10 minutes, with some short sell and buyback orders, she could easily save the situation. But she didn't. The promise to Grandfather Theron still resonated. If he betrays you. The betrayal hadn't officially happened yet. She was still waiting. She scrolled through the emails, rapidly typing complex command lines, giving instructions to the world's largest investment banks. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, creating a blur. Exit the German market, short sell the Nikkei, buy gold, restructure Argentina's debt. After 1 hour of work, she closed the laptop, put it back in the briefcase, and locked it. Ariadna disappeared. Zendaya Vance, the country girl and illiterate wife, was back. She sat on the bed, listening to the roar of Jamal's sports car outside. He was back, but he wouldn't come up here. He didn't even consider this room part of the house. The coldness of the attic seemed to infiltrate her heart. in the CEO's office of the Sterling Group, located in the Sterling Tower in downtown Atlanta, crash. The crystal ashtray was hurled by Jamal Sterling against the opposite wall, shattering into pieces. "Useless! A bunch of useless fools!" he yelled at his department heads via video call. "I pay you millions of dollars a year, and you can't solve a simple liquidity problem? The German banks are refusing to extend the loan. Why?" The directors lowered their heads. No one dared to answer. The European biotechnology project had failed miserably. It was burning through the Sterling Group's cash faster than a furnace. Shareholders had already started asking questions. Jamal hung up the call abruptly, loosening his tie. He was truly in trouble. Just then, the office door opened softly. Kiana Sorrell entered, holding a cup of hot coffee. She wasn't wearing a secretary's uniform, but a tight, sensual dress. "Jamal," she said softly, walking around the desk and placing her hands on his shoulders, gently massaging them. "Don't get upset. I'm sure there's a solution." Her warmth and perfume calmed Jamal slightly. He closed his eyes, leaning back in the chair. "What solution? All the banks have turned their backs on me." Kiana smiled. "The banks might have turned their backs on you, but the Sterling family hasn't." Jamal opened his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I just remembered," Kiana said, as if by chance. "I think Grandfather Theron left Zendaya some shares before he died." "It was 20%, Jamal frowned. "Yes, but they're locked in a trust. They're useless unless she voluntarily signs the transfer, and she—" "But isn't she your wife?" Kiana interrupted, her voice full of implication. "A wife has a responsibility to share her husband's burdens. No?" Jamal looked at her. "Say what you have to say." "She trusts you a lot," Kiana said, her fingers lightly trailing across his chest. "Besides, I hear she can't read or write. If it's to save the group, to save the family, perhaps she'd agree to sign some papers to help the company. After all, she's a Sterling, too." A chilling silence filled the office. Jamal suddenly realized. He looked at Kiana. She's illiterate. A cruel, excited smile slowly formed on his handsome face. It's true. An illiterate person knows nothing about stock transfer contracts. Kiana, seeing that he understood, added, "This weekend, the Atlanta High Society is hosting the Hope and Legacy Charity Gala to raise funds for disadvantaged children. There will be lots of reporters." She looked at him passionately. "If you bring Zendaya, you show your love as husband and wife, and then, casually, you sign some donation papers in front of everyone. No one will suspect a thing." When Jamal entered the house, Zendaya instinctively took a step back, bracing herself for the usual insults or indifference. But today, Jamal did not walk past her. He stopped. "Zendaya." His voice wasn't cold. It could almost be called kind. Zendaya looked up, her eyes wide, showing surprise and a little fear. It was the first time in 3 years he had said her name without a hint of contempt. "I'm taking you to an event this weekend," he said, trying to sound natural. Zendaya shook her head hastily, her hands gripping her apron. I can't go. I don't know how to socialize. I'll embarrass you." "It doesn't matter." Jamal was unusually patient, even taking a step toward her. "It's a very significant charity event. You just need to be there with me." He looked at her. "There will be a large donation for underprivileged children. I want you to represent the Sterling family and sign the donation papers." Zendaya stared at him, trying to find sincerity in his eyes, but she only saw thinly veiled falsehood. "Get yourself a decent outfit," he added, turning away, but maintaining the kind tone. "Don't worry, I'll be there." He left the kitchen. Zendaya stood motionless, her hands tightly clasped. A charity event, signing papers. Jamal, who had always considered her a blight, was willingly taking her to a place full of reporters. She knew the Sterling Group's situation well. She knew he was desperate. The fish had finally bitten the hook. The St. Regis Atlanta, the Hope and Legacy Charity Gala, was indeed extremely luxurious. Media and prominent Atlanta figures were all present. Jamal Sterling, in an elegant tuxedo, stepped out of a Rolls-Royce. He walked around the car to open the door, and the person who stepped out was not Kiana, as usual, but Zendaya Vance. She wore a simple long beige dress, her hair pulled back into a low bun. The clothes were clean, but compared to the designer gowns and glitter around her, she looked like a sparrow lost in a flock of peacocks. All cameras turned toward them. For the first time in his life, Jamal placed an arm around Zendaya's waist. Her body tensed. She perfectly played the role of a frightened country girl clinging to her husband's arm. "Mr. Sterling, is this Mrs. Sterling?" "What a surprise, Mr. Sterling. The rumors about your relationship with your executive assistant, Kiana." Jamal smiled perfectly. "Today, my wife and I are here for a charitable cause. Zendaya, although not used to these noisy places, has a very kind heart." He said these words, but the hand on her waist squeezed like a vice, warning her to keep silent. After the obligatory greetings, Jamal led Zendaya not to the main ballroom, but to a private VIP room that was already set up. "You're tired, aren't you?" he said, the kindness still on his face, but impatience already visible in his eyes. "Rest here. I'm going to greet some partners. Someone will bring the documents for you to sign in a little while." Zendaya nodded obediently, sitting on the edge of the sofa, her back straight and her hands in her lap, exactly like a student waiting for a teacher. Jamal left, satisfied. A good while later, the room door opened. It wasn't Jamal, but his personal lawyer, Attorney Quentin Miles. Behind him, 2 security guards. Attorney Miles looked uncomfortable. He placed a thick folder of documents on the table. "Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Jamal said you agreed to sign this." Zendaya looked at the folder. She didn't need to read it. Just by the thickness and the leather cover, she knew they weren't donation papers. Just then, Jamal entered. He had already gotten rid of the reporters. "Sign it," he said bluntly. Zendaya looked at him, then at the folder with a confused expression. "Jamal, you said it was a donation. Why are there so many papers?" Jamal lost his patience. "Why are you asking so many questions? It's the necessary procedure to release the charity funds." He flipped directly to the last page, a page full of text in both English and Spanish. He pointed to a blank line at the bottom. "Sign your name, Zendaya Vance, here." Zendaya trembled. She looked at the title at the top. Although he tried to cover a part of it with his finger, she could still read the 4 words, Stock Transfer Agreement Contract. She began to act, her eyes filled with tears. Her voice trembled. "Jamal, those are so many letters. I don't know how to read it, you know? What if I sign in the wrong place?" Attorney Miles was sweating profusely. "Mr. Sterling, having an illiterate person sign such an important contract legally—" "Shut up!" Jamal shouted, glaring at Attorney Miles. The lawyer immediately fell silent. Jamal turned back to Zendaya, his anger almost impossible to hide, but he contained himself, his voice becoming eerily persuasive. "It's just your name. What are you afraid of? Or do you want me to write out a model for you to copy like a grade school student?" The humiliation in those words made Zendaya clench her fists. She sobbed. Where do I sign?" "Here." He pointed to the line. "Yes, write Zendaya Vance here. Come on, be a good girl." His voice was as if he were persuading a child. Zendaya picked up the expensive fountain pen, her hand trembling violently. She lowered her head so her hair would hide her cold gaze. She began to write stroke by stroke, slowly and clumsily, exactly like someone trying to copy a name they didn't quite understand. Zendaya Vank. On the last letter, the E of Vance, she paused. Jamal held his breath. She bit her lip and then finished writing, but in the final stroke of the letter, she deliberately added a small, almost imperceptible extra stroke that broke the letter and made it structurally incorrect. It still read Vance, but legally it was an invalid signature. She put down the pen, panting as if she had just done something extremely exhausting. Jamal immediately grabbed the folder, quickly glanced at the signature. It looked like an ugly scrawl, typical of an illiterate person. He didn't notice the anomaly. A victorious smile appeared on his face. "Done." He snapped the folder shut forcefully. "It's done. Stay here. Don't move. I'll take care of the rest." He and Attorney Miles left hastily, as if she were a plague. Zendaya remained alone in the private room. Slowly, she lifted her head. There was no more fear or tears. She looked at the hand she had just used to sign. A painful signature. Painful not for her, but for Jamal Sterling's stupidity and cruelty. The game was nearing its end. The drive back to the Sterling Buckhead estate was an absolute silence. If on the way there, Jamal had still tried to play the role of the kind husband, now he didn't even bother to conceal his euphoria and aversion. He was constantly on the phone, his voice full of triumph, completely ignoring Zendaya sitting beside him. As soon as they entered the living room, he didn't even wait for her to take off her shoes. He loosened his tie, threw himself onto the sofa, and immediately dialed a number. This time, he put it on speakerphone. Kiana's spoiled voice instantly rang out. "Jamal, is it done, my love?" Jamal let out a burst of satisfied laughter. "Honey, it's done." Zendaya, who was taking off her shoes, paused. She slowly turned around. "Seriously?" Kiana squealed. "That stupid country girl actually signed?" "Yes." Jamal leaned back, putting his feet up on the table. "The 20% of shares are all in my hands. I'm transferring them to you immediately. Tomorrow morning, the lawyer will handle all the paperwork. You'll be a major shareholder of the Sterling Group." He looked at Zendaya, who was frozen by the door, with a provocative look. "The Sterling Group is saved, Kiana. You are my greatest savior. Your apartment tonight, okay? We have to celebrate." "Yes," Kiana laughed. "I'll be waiting. I love you." The call ended. The atmosphere in the living room became icy. Zendaya walked toward him, her hands clenched. She still played the role of the naive wife. "Jamal," her voice trembled. "What are you saying? What shares? Transferring to Ms. Sorrell?" She tried to insist. "No, wasn't it a charity donation for the children?" "Charity?" Jamal sprang up. He laughed, a loud, joyless laugh, only absolute cruelty and contempt. He walked toward Zendaya, his handsome face now looking terrifying. "Do you really think an illiterate fool like you has any value to make charity donations?" Zendaya took a step back. "But you said—" "Shut up," he yelled, tearing off the mask of kindness from the gala. 3 years. I've had to tolerate you for 3 years, tolerating that ignorant country face of yours, tolerating that all of Atlanta laughs at me for marrying a passive, illiterate wife." He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look him in the eyes. "Do you think Grandfather Theron left you 20% of the shares for what? For you to enjoy? For you to be Mrs. Sterling?" He spat on the floor. "No! That is Sterling family property. It belongs to me. Today, I've only taken back what is mine." Zendaya's tears streamed. "You deceived me!" "Deceived?" He laughed disdainfully. "Dealing with an illiterate person isn't called deceiving. It's called optimizing resources." He released her chin but patted her cheek, a gesture of supreme humiliation. "Your only usefulness in these 3 years has been this 20% of shares. Now that the contract is signed—" He backed away, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped the fingers that had touched her, as if she were something dirty. "You're useless now." The last words were said slowly and clearly. Zendaya fell to her knees. Jamal looked at her kneeling on the floor, his gaze without a hint of compassion. He went to the desk in the corner of the living room, pulled out a document folder that had been long prepared, and threw it directly in her face. The papers scattered, falling around Zendaya. "Divorce papers." His voice was cold as ice. "I've already signed. You're next. You aren't entitled to a single penny. You came here empty-handed. You leave here empty-handed." He bent down and picked up a sheet. "Oh, I forgot. You can't even read." He picked up a fingerprint ink pad and tossed it at her feet. "Put your digital print here now." Zendaya didn't pick up the divorce papers. She only raised her head and looked at him, tears streaming. Her gaze was no longer fearful, but terrifyingly empty. Jamal saw that look and became even angrier. "What are you still looking at? Do you think I'm going to keep you here? An ignorant piece of trash who can't even give me a child? Sign and disappear from my house, now!" Zendaya remained silent. "Disappear!" He lost all patience. He rushed, grabbed her arm, and dragged her toward the door. He yanked the front door wide open and shoved her, making her fall onto the cold steps outside. "Tomorrow morning," he stood on the step, looking down at her. "I don't want to see your face in this house ever again." He slammed the door shut. Zendaya lay on the cold granite floor. The night wind from the coast blew. Slowly, she sat up, put a hand to her face to wipe the tears. She looked at the firmly closed wooden door. "Jamal Sterling, the one who has to disappear is you." She got up, brushed the dust off her cheap dress, and didn't look back. She walked calmly out the grand gates of the Sterling property. The heavy oak door of the Sterling estate closed with a resounding final sound. Zendaya Vance fell helpless onto the cold granite steps. The chilly November night in Atlanta brought a coldness that pierced her fragile body through the cheap fabric of her dress. She had just been expelled from her home by Jamal Sterling, her legal husband, as if she were a bag of trash. She lay there for a few seconds, feeling the cutting cold penetrate her skin. It began to drizzle. Cold raindrops fell on her face, mixing with the tears of humiliation she deliberately let stream. Zendaya slowly sat up. She didn't retrieve the small bag of clothes he had thrown out. The rain began to fall harder, torrentially, washing away the cheap makeup from her face, revealing a delicate face, pale from the cold. She staggered up toward the main gate. Just then, two blinding beams of light illuminated her face. An arrogant, wine-red Maserati braked sharply right in front of the gate, nearly hitting her. The car door opened. It wasn't Jamal. The uniformed driver hurried out, opening an umbrella. Kiana Sorrell emerged. She wasn't wearing a secretary's uniform, but a very expensive burgundy evening gown with a white mink fur coat over her shoulders. She looked like the true hostess of the party and the house. She walked slowly toward Zendaya, the umbrella carefully protecting her, not letting a single raindrop touch her. She looked at Zendaya, who was drenched, her hair plastered to her face, as miserable as an abandoned dog. "Oh!" Kiana covered her mouth, her voice full of false compassion. "Zendaya, how did it come to this? It's raining so hard. Why are you out here?" Zendaya lifted her head, her eyes red, looking at her. "Jamal had a matter to attend to, so he asked me to come and say goodbye to you." Kiana smiled, a sweet smile, but her words were like knives. "After all, for the past 3 years, you've taken care of Jamal for me. I should thank you." She moved closer, lowering her voice enough so only the two of them could hear. "Do you know what Jamal said when he got your signature?" Zendaya clenched her fists. "He said," Kiana whispered in her ear, "that he finally got rid of that stupid, dirty dead weight." "Kiana!" Zendaya growled, furious. The smile on Kiana's lips disappeared, replaced by an expression of superiority and hatred. "Who do you think you are? Do you think the title of Mrs. Sterling was really yours?" Slap. A violent slap. Kiana used all her strength. The impact was so strong that Zendaya fell into a puddle of dirty water. "Country girl," Kiana hissed, her beautiful face contorted. "You occupied my place for 3 years. In these 3 years, the person who should have been in that mansion was me. The person who should have been loved and pampered by Jamal was me. This slap. You owed me this." She pulled a silk handkerchief from her purse, wiped the hand that had just struck Zendaya as if she had touched something vile, and then tossed the handkerchief onto her. "Look at you. How pathetic. A useless illiterate. You never belonged here." The chauffeur opened the car door for Kiana, and she elegantly sat down. "Oh, that's right." She turned and smiled one last time. "From now on, the Sterling house has a new owner, and that 20% of shares? Jamal offered them to me as a wedding gift." The Maserati roared, passed by Zendaya, deliberately splashing through a puddle and splattering her with dirty water. The heavy iron gate of the property opened to receive the car, and then slowly closed, leaving Zendaya outside in the rain and humiliation. Zendaya remained motionless in the puddle of cold water. After a few minutes, she put her hands down and stood up. The torrential rain seemed to have washed away all the weakness and resignation of the past 3 years. She ran a hand through her soaked hair, pushing it back. In the darkness, her eyes no longer showed fear or confusion, only a terrifying coldness and sharpness. She didn't look back at the Sterling Gate again. She turned and began walking in the rain. After a few steps, she stopped beside an old public phone booth. She entered, picked up the receiver, but didn't put in any coins. She dialed a long, complex sequence of numbers on the keypad. After a few tones, the call was answered. An extremely respectful man's voice sounded in perfect English. "Miss Vance." Zendaya looked at the Atlanta rain, her voice calm and cold. "Assistant Chen, prepare." "Prepare what, ma'am?" "Activate the Ariadne Protocol. Notify Deutsche Bank, JP Morgan, and Nomura. It's time to reel in the net." She paused for a moment and added, "The game has begun." In total contrast to the cold rain outside, inside the Sterling Buckhead estate, the fireplace was blazing fiercely, the flames dancing in the expensive cognac glasses. Jamal Sterling had just showered, wore a silk bathrobe, and was sitting on the sofa with his feet up on the table. He was at the peak of satisfaction. He had gotten rid of the thorn bothering him, obtained the 20% of shares, and was about to save his group. Kiana, also freshly showered, wore a thin, transparent black silk nightgown. Barefoot, she came to sit on his lap. Diane came downstairs, her face radiant with joy. She sat in the chair opposite. "Finally, our family is rid of that burden. You did well, Jamal." Jamal took a sip of cognac, his hand firmly wrapped around Kiana's waist. "Mother, it was obvious. I told you I wasn't going to let an illiterate country girl stain our family for long." Diane looked at Kiana with satisfaction. "Kiana, darling, it was difficult for you to have to endure the humiliation of being the other woman all this time." Kiana immediately leaned on Jamal's shoulder, her voice a little timid and embarrassed. "Auntie, it doesn't matter. As long as I can be with Jamal, I'm satisfied." She looked at Jamal, then at Diane. "Besides," she bit her lip with a hesitant yet happy expression, "Auntie, Jamal, I have another piece of good news. I don't know if I should say it now." Jamal laughed, thinking she wanted a gift. "What is it, treasure? I'll give you anything you want. The diamond necklace from the other day, or a villa in Savannah." "It's not that." Kiana lightly patted his chest. "I think—" She took a deep breath and placed her hand on her belly. "I think I'm pregnant, with Jamal's baby." "What?" The glass in Jamal's hand nearly fell. He was stunned. Diane sprang up, running over to Kiana, her voice trembling with emotion. "Kiana, are you serious? You're pregnant?" Kiana nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm 2 weeks late. I took the test this morning, and it was positive. I was going to tell you over the weekend." "Oh, my God!" Diane clasped her hands. "The Sterling family is going to have an heir. We're going to have a successor." Jamal was stunned for a few seconds, and then euphoria took hold of him. Pregnant. He was going to be a father. It was double happiness. He had the money and a son to continue his name. That useless Zendaya Vance. 3 years, and she couldn't even give him one child. He hugged Kiana tightly, lifted her, and spun her around. "Kiana, you are my treasure, my goddess of luck." He put her down and kissed her forehead. "Mother, did you hear? I'm going to have a son." Diane was so happy she was crying. I heard. That's wonderful, my good daughter-in-law." She immediately changed the way she addressed her. Kiana nestled into Jamal's arms, concealing a victorious smile. Of course, she wasn't pregnant. She had bought the pregnancy test online, but she needed a solid guarantee. The next morning, the chaos at the Sterling Tower was in full swing. The Sterling Group stock had been suspended from trading due to the vertical drop. Creditors were lining up outside the tower. The extraordinary general meeting was scheduled for 2 days later, and it was his last lifeline. He was frantically calling, using all his contacts, but only received silence or polite refusals. The Ariadne analysis had hit the group's Achilles heel. No one dared to save a sinking ship. Kiana was equally panicked. The position of Mrs. Sterling wasn't even guaranteed. The child in her belly didn't even exist, and she might have to go out on the street and beg with him. Jamal tried to calm her, although his own hands were shaking. "Don't worry, we still have the 20% of shares that Zendaya transferred. Tomorrow morning, I'll pressure the lawyer to finalize the transfer. Even if the shares have depreciated, it's still a large amount. We can use it to negotiate." Jamal nodded, but he knew it was only a small comfort. Just then, his executive assistant, Mr. Leon Bridges, rushed in, pale as a sheet. "Mr. Sterling, there's news." "What now?" Jamal shouted. "Another bank pulled funding?" "No." Mr. Bridges shook his head, handing him the tablet. "It's an email, sir. An email that was just sent simultaneously to the inboxes of all board members and the international partners who abandoned us." "What email?" Jamal snatched the tablet. The email was written in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and German. It was short but powerful. "Open letter to the Sterling Group, Board of Directors and Creditors. We are Ariadne Capital. We have closely followed the Sterling Group crisis, a crisis originating from poor management and erroneous investment decisions. However, we believe in the group's fundamentals and potential. At the upcoming extraordinary general meeting, a representative of ours will be present as a new strategic shareholder. We will present a comprehensive restructuring plan, including an immediate capital injection to resolve the entire debt crisis. Sincerely, Ariadne Capital." Jamal gritted his teeth. "Ariadne, the same name as the report that destroyed me." Who are they?" Kiana asked, trembling. He paced back and forth. "And now they appear as strategic shareholders. It's obvious they want to take advantage of this opportunity to take control of the Sterling Group at a bargain price." Kiana realized. "My God, how cruel." "Cruelty," Jamal laughed coldly. "That's business, but they've made a mistake." He sat down. The initial panic disappeared, replaced by a fighting spirit. "They think I'm an easy target? They think the Sterling Group is easy to swallow?" He looked at Kiana. "Find out who the hell this Ariadne Capital is." "You're going to confront them." "Confront them? I'm going to show them who's in charge of the Sterling Group. They want to take control? Let them come." He still had one ace up his sleeve. He believed that the 20% of shares he had swindled from Zendaya, added to his own shares, would be enough to repel any hostile takeover attempt. He had no idea that Ariadne Capital wasn't a vulture. It was the hunter, and he was the prey. While Jamal was frantically preparing for a battle against an acquisition elsewhere in Atlanta, the atmosphere was completely different. The Mandarin Oriental Atlanta, the most expensive presidential suite with a dazzling view over the Atlanta skyline at night. The city's neon lights illuminated the room, creating a magical setting. Zendaya Vance stood in front of the window. She no longer wore her country clothing. She wore a black silk bathrobe, her long, dark hair loose like a waterfall. In her hand, a glass of red wine, a Chateau Margaux from 1990. If Jamal or Diahan saw her now, they certainly wouldn't believe their own eyes. Her aura, noble, cold, and distant, could in no way belong to the illiterate country girl they knew. The humid attic seemed like a memory from another life. Knock, knock. Someone knocked on the door. "Come in." Her voice was clear but cold. Assistant Savannah Chen entered. A middle-aged man with gold-rimmed glasses, his expression extremely respectful. He was the manager of Zendaya's enormous private investment fund, Ariadne Capital. "President Vance." Assistant Chen bowed his head. He had been accustomed to dealing with her like this for 8 years. "Everything is ready for 9 o'clock tomorrow at the Sterling Tower." Zendaya did not turn around. She gently swirled the red liquid, observing it. "And our guests?" Assistant Chen opened his organizer. "Confirmed. Our entire international legal team from Sullivan and Cromwell landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport 2 hours ago. They are resting in this hotel." He turned the page. "And as you requested, we have sent personal invitations to the largest creditors. The senior representative of Deutsche Bank from Berlin has confirmed," he read. "Director Schmidt, the same one who refused Jamal Sterling's 17 calls, will be present. The Nomura representative from Tokyo has confirmed. The executive vice president of JP Morgan from New York has confirmed. They were the ones who sold the most of the group's shares, following our instructions. And finally, the Paris Investment Fund has also sent a representative. They are all anxious to meet Ariadna in person, the person who saved them from a disastrous investment in the Sterling Group." "Excellent," Zendaya finally said. She took a sip of wine, the slightly bitter taste spreading across her tongue. She looked at the Sterling Tower, brilliantly lit in the distance. She could imagine Jamal panicking like a wounded animal inside. 3 years. She remembered the day Grandfather Theron took her hand on his deathbed. "Give him a chance," he had said. She gave it to him. She remembered the 3 years living like a servant. Diahan's look of contempt, Jamal's cold indifference. She remembered the humiliating trap of the charity gala, the signature she deliberately botched, and she remembered Kiana's slap. That slap. She was going to return it 100 times over. "Jamal Sterling," she whispered to herself, her voice blending with the Atlanta night wind. "For the last 3 years, you owe me. Tomorrow I will take it all back, with interest." "President Vance," Assistant Chen interrupted her thoughts. "The suit you requested for tomorrow is prepared." He pointed to a suit ceremoniously hung on a rack. It was a custom-tailored, pearl-white suit from the finest tailor in Paris. It was elegant, powerful, and absolutely exquisite. Zendaya nodded. "Very well. You may retire. Tell everyone to rest well." "Yes, President Vance." Assistant Chen quietly exited, closing the door. In the luxurious presidential suite, Zendaya raised her glass toward the Sterling Tower. "A toast to your stupidity. 9 o'clock in the morning, Sterling Tower." Never had the Sterling Group headquarters been so chaotic. Hundreds of reporters from large and small financial media, both national and international, crowded the main lobby, held back by a dense security barrier. Will Mr. Sterling appear? Will the group declare bankruptcy today? Who is Ariadna Capital? Are they really going to take control of the group? Camera flashes fired incessantly, and the noise and shoving were deafening. Inside the main auditorium on the 68th floor, the atmosphere was even more suffocating. The auditorium, with a capacity for 500 people, was completely packed. Shareholders from large investment funds to small investors were all present, their faces expressing confusion, rage, and despair. Their shares were now worth almost nothing. Ding. The bell signaling the start of the meeting rang. A side door opened. Jamal Sterling entered. He tried to keep his chest out to look calm, but his pale face and dark circles under his eyes betrayed him. He took the stand, adjusted the microphone. "Today," he cleared his throat, "I know you are all very concerned. I admit that the Sterling Group is going through temporary difficulties." "Temporary?" A shout from the audience. Mr. Preston Hayes, an elderly, respected man and longtime rival of the Sterling family, jumped up in the front row. In a separate area, the international creditors, men in expensive suits from Germany, Japan, and America, sat, their faces cold as stone, silently watching, waiting for their prey to struggle. "Mr. Hayes, I know you are dissatisfied with me, but today is not the time for criticism. Our biggest problem is liquidity and share structure." He took a deep breath, deciding to play his hand. He still believed he controlled the situation. "I inform you that the problem of the 20% of locked shares has been resolved. I have acquired all of those shares." He deliberately lied, saying the process was concluded. The auditorium calmed slightly. 20% was a significant number. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice full of confidence, As you all know from the email, today we are welcoming a new strategic investor, Ariadna Capital. They have promised to inject capital and save the Sterling Group. He forced a weak smile. Whether their intention is an acquisition or a partnership, I, Jamal Sterling, as the largest shareholder, will guarantee everyone's interests. He still thought he was the largest shareholder. He still thought Ariadna was an external enemy he could negotiate with. Jamal Sterling, you call this temporary? Mr. Hayes pointed to the large screen showing the stock's freefall chart. You have destroyed the work of your grandfather's entire life. You have turned our wealth into worthless paper. Give us back our money, Jamal Sterling. Resign. The auditorium became chaotic. Kiana, frightened, backed up behind Jamal. Silence! Jamal yelled into the microphone. Everyone, silence! He looked at Mr. Hayes. Mr. Ha. But before he could finish, crack! The main auditorium door, a heavy solid wood door reserved for the most solemn occasions, suddenly flew wide open from the outside. 2 blinding beams of light from the hallway entered, causing everyone to squint. All sound ceased. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turned in unison toward the door. From the blinding light, a figure emerged. The only sound in the enormous auditorium was the rhythmic, sharp click, click of high heels on the marble floor. The person stepped into the light. It was a woman. She wore a suit, not an evening gown, not an office suit. A powerful, pearl-white suit, perfectly cut to embrace her slender but balanced figure. Her long, dark hair was pulled back into an elegant bun, revealing a high forehead and a proud swan-like neck. She wore little makeup, but her burgundy lips and her cold, razor-sharp gaze made it impossible to look away. Her aura was not of wealth, but of dominance, a presence so imposing that all the powerful men in the room suddenly felt small. Behind her were no security guards, but Assistant Chen, whom some older shareholders vaguely recognized, and behind Assistant Chen, a team of 10 people, men and women in black suits, with blonde, brown hair, blue eyes, and fair skin. It was the world's elite team of international lawyers. The auditorium was in absolute silence. Everyone held their breath. Who is she? Is this the representative of Ariadna Capital? The woman continued walking down the central aisle toward the podium. As she passed the row of international investors, the powerful men from Berlin, Tokyo, and New York, the same ones who had ignored Jamal Sterling, all rose in unison. They slightly bowed their heads in greeting, a sign of absolute respect. The entire auditorium erupted in a silent murmur. At that moment, Jamal felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He stood paralyzed. His brain refused to process the information. This woman with this aura of a queen, with this penetrating gaze. How was it possible? It was Zendaya Vance. It was the country girl, the passive wife, the useless illiterate he had kicked out of the house just a few days ago. No, 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 he muttered, taking a step back. Kiana was even more shocked. Jamal, Jamal. She clutched his arm, trembling. Why? Why is she here? What is she wearing? She... The terrifying silence was broken by Jamal Sterling's roar. Denial morphed into blind fury. He couldn't accept the reality. It had to be a joke. She had come back to beg. She had dared to ruin his meeting. Security? He screamed, his voice strident, echoing through the microphone. He pointed his finger directly at Zendaya Vance, his face contorted with rage. Security! Are you all blind? Who let this country girl in here? He yelled at the entire auditorium. This is a shareholders meeting. It's not a place for an illiterate to cause a scandal. Get her out! Drag her out of here now! His roar resonated. The Sterling Group security guards ran over hesitantly, but were immediately blocked by the international legal team. Zendaya Vance didn't even look at Jamal. She finally reached the foot of the podium, lifted her head, and looked directly at Jamal Sterling. Jamal's crazed fury still echoed in the auditorium. Security! Throw her out! But no guard dared to move forward. They were intimidated by the presence of this woman. The entire auditorium fell into a strange silence. Hundreds of pairs of eyes were fixed on her, waiting. Zendaya Vance smiled, a cold, distant smile. She calmly picked up the second microphone on the podium, the same microphone Jamal had just shouted into. She tapped it lightly. Tap, tap. The amplified sound resonated, cutting through the chaos. Jamal seemed to wake up from the nightmare. He stared at her, his eyes bloodshot. "Zendaya Vance, what are you doing here? Are you crazy?" He still couldn't believe it. He still thought she was the illiterate country girl. "And that white suit you're wearing? Where did you steal those clothes? Do you think just because you wear designer clothes you have the right to come here and cause a scandal?" Kiana also stammered, Zendaya, leave! This is not the place for you! Don't make Jamal angrier!" Zendaya finally turned to look at them. Her gaze held no hatred, only absolute pity. In her eyes, his screams were just the final whimpers of a loser. She ignored him. She ignored the chaos. She ignored the hundreds of pairs of eyes watching her. She calmly walked up the steps to the podium where Jamal and Kiana stood. She stopped next to the lectern. She didn't look at Jamal, who was paralyzed, his face pale as ash, nor at Kiana, who was trembling, clutching his arm, her beautiful face now white as paper. Jamal Sterling. Her voice was clear, crisp, and cold as ice, resonating through the auditorium's sound system, is still as ignorant and childish as ever. The auditorium was stunned. Dayahan, in the row below, jumped up. "What did you say? You dare to call my son ignorant?" Director Schmidt, the German with the perpetually impassive face, who had refused Jamal's 17 calls, sprang up, knocking over the chair behind him. He stared at her, his eyes wide, his voice trembling with emotion. You are Ariadna!" Beside him, the executive vice president of J.P. Morgan, the powerful American, also jumped up. He looked directly at Director Schmidt of Deutsche Bank, who was watching her, holding his breath. "I am Ariadna." 2 words. Only 2 words, but they were like an atomic bomb exploding in the middle of the auditorium. Jamal and Kiana were stunned. Ariadna? What Ariadna? They didn't realize. They didn't belong to the global financial elite. They didn't know the weight of that name, but the others did. My God, Ariadna! The mysterious analyst who made the National Pension Fund collapse with a single analysis, the Sterling Group analysis, she wrote it. Jamal didn't understand. He didn't understand what the hell was happening. "What are you people doing?" He turned to Director Schmidt. "Mr. Schmidt, do you know this country girl? Are you all crazy? She can't read." His shouts no longer held any authority. They were simply pathetic. Zendaya didn't need to say anything more. The reverence of the international financial magnates was the most eloquent answer. She took the microphone, her sharp gaze sweeping across the entire auditorium, and began her speech. "To start, I would like to thank Mr. Jamal Sterling, who in his capacity as CEO has demonstrated to all of us what poor management, investment arrogance, and total irresponsibility in crisis management look like. It was he who led the Sterling Group, the legacy of his grandfather, to this shameful situation." Jamal paled, staggered backward, leaning on the lectern. He muttered like a madman, "No, it can't be. 5 languages. She can't read. Kiana, beside him, was completely undone. She could only stare at Jamal, then at Zendaya. Absolute terror was visible in her eyes. She knew she had offended someone she could not afford to offend. The auditorium was in absolute silence. Hundreds of people, from shareholders to reporters, listened, holding their breath. Zendaya's speech was unlike any they had heard. It was incisive, precise, and powerful. Without needing to look at any papers, she began in impeccable Spanish. Her voice, clear but cold, resonated through the auditorium. She immediately turned to the American investors, her voice switching to perfect, fluent English. "To our American partners at J.P. Morgan, I understand your concerns about the liquidity hole caused by this disastrous European venture. Let me be clear," Zendaya continued. "That investment is terminated with immediate effect. My team will present a comprehensive restructuring plan this afternoon, and a personal capital injection from Ariadne Capital will guarantee 100% of your capital." Then she turned to Director Schmidt, who watched her solemnly. Her voice changed to fluent German. "To the German investors, Mr. Schmidt, I appreciate your concern, but the biotechnology project was a mistake. We will dispose of the useless biotech and refocus on Sterling's core competencies, next-generation semiconductor materials. I guarantee this will revolutionize our market position." Director Schmidt sighed with relief and nodded decisively. Her gaze then moved to the Nomura representative from Japan. She bowed slightly, out of courtesy, and spoke in Japanese. "To our partners at Nomura in Japan, your orders will be reinstated under the condition of a 5-year exclusivity contract. The guarantee I offer is Ariadne's quality, not Jamal Sterling's quality." The Japanese representative hurried to bow in response. Finally, she looked at the Paris Investment Fund. Her voice changed again to melodious but firm French. "To our friends in Paris, the luxury market Sterling tried to enter is a monumental strategic error. We will sell that division immediately. The fund injection from my side will cover the financial hole. The funds will be released tomorrow." 5 languages: Spanish, English, German, Japanese, French, all spoken with fluency, precision, and confidence by the mouth of a woman, the woman who had been called illiterate for 3 years. Jamal was petrified. He didn't understand a word of German, Japanese, or French, but he understood Spanish and English. He heard her speak of terminating projects and personal capital injections. He saw Director Schmidt, the VP of J.P. Morgan, all nodding, their faces filled with confidence. His worst nightmare was coming true. Not only had he been deceived, he had been deceived by a genius for 3 years. He had treated a genius like a dog. "No," he muttered. "5 languages. Impossible. This is a hallucination." Kiana, beside him, was completely undone. She looked at Jamal, then at Zendaya. Absolute terror was visible in her eyes. She knew she had offended someone she could not offend. Zendaya finished her conversation with the international investors, turned back, and looked directly at Jamal. She spoke again in Spanish, so everyone in the auditorium could understand. "And now, Mr. Sterling," she smiled coldly, "let's talk about that 20% of shares." Jamal and Kiana were paralyzed. Jamal was muttering non-stop like a broken machine. "5 languages, impossible. She can't read, Kiana was so scared her teeth were chattering. Jamal! Jamal! What do we do now? What do we do?" Zendaya looked at Jamal, her gaze devoid of emotion. "Mr. Sterling, you just announced to this auditorium that you obtained my 20% of shares and that you were going to transfer them to Ms. Sorrell." Jamal jumped. The shares! It was true. He still had the 20% of shares. He had her signature. A glimmer of hope shone. He clung to it. "Yes, it's true," he shouted, trying to regain his composure. "So what if you know 5 languages? So what if you're faking? You signed the share transfer papers. You signed them right here." He motioned to Attorney Miles, who was pale as ash in a corner. "Attorney Miles, bring the contract. Bring it here." Attorney Miles trembled, not daring to move. "No need to bother," Zendaya said coldly. She motioned to Assistant Chen. Assistant Chen nodded, connecting a flash drive to the auditorium's projection system. The large screen behind Jamal, which had recently shown the stock's falling chart, suddenly went black and then lit up. It wasn't a document, it was a video. The setting was the VIP room of the St. Regis on the night of the charity gala. Jamal recognized it instantly. It was the room he had used to deceive Zendaya. "What is this?" he panicked. "Turn that off! Who allowed this to be shown? Turn it off!" But it was too late. The video, recorded from a hidden camera button on Zendaya's dress, began to play. The sound was perfectly clear. The video showed Jamal entering. It showed Zendaya pretending to be scared. "Those are so many letters, I don't know how to read it." It showed Jamal yelling at Attorney Miles. "Shut up!" And it showed him persuading her. "Right here. Come on, be a good girl." The entire auditorium held its breath. My God, he deceived his own wife. He deceived an illiterate person into signing over property. He's worse than an animal, Diane screamed downstairs. "Fake! This video is fake! My son isn't like that!" But no one believed her. Jamal stumbled backward, hitting the lectern. No, this is a setup! It's fake! Fake!" Zendaya raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Sterling, we haven't reached the best part yet." She motioned to Assistant Chen to advance the video. The screen zoomed in on the document folder, and here, Zendaya's cold voice sounded in perfect synchrony with the image. "Here is the signature I made." The screen showed an extremely close-up shot of the 3 scrawled words, Zendaya Vance. Jamal stared intently. He saw nothing abnormal. It was the same ugly signature. "What are you trying to prove? The signature is there. You signed," he shouted. Zendaya smiled. "Mr. Sterling, you are the CEO of a large group, and you don't even have basic legal knowledge." She turned to her legal team. A blonde woman, representative of the Sullivan and Cromwell firm, took the stand, picked up a microphone, and spoke in terrifyingly fluent Spanish. "Good morning, everyone. I am Aisha Knowles Escreller, representative attorney for Mrs. Zendaya Vance." She pointed to the screen. "According to the Civil Code and the Stock Corporation Law, a signature must correctly and completely represent the signatory's name. If a signature is deliberately altered or signed under duress, it will be considered void." She made a signal. The screen zoomed in even closer on the last stroke of the word Vance. "Please look closely," Aisha Knowles said. "The final E in Vance. Mrs. Zendaya Vance deliberately added a small, almost imperceptible extra stroke that broke the letter. In calligraphic terms, this is an incorrect signature. It is not her name," she smiled. "Combined with the video evidence that clearly demonstrates Mr. Jamal Sterling's fraudulent and intentional behavior against a person he believed to be illiterate," she paused, and then declared firmly, "this contract to transfer the 20% of shares is, from the beginning, null and void." Boom! Jamal felt as if someone had hit him on the head with a hammer. Void. False signature. She had tricked him at the very moment he signed. He looked at Zendaya. She was still there, calm. That plan, that patience, that cruelty. He trembled. He was facing a monster. "Void, void. And then what?" he repeated. "She's still my wife. She still has nothing." He tried to cling to the last thread of logic. Zendaya looked at him with pity. "Did you think I only had that 20% of shares, Jamal?" Zendaya's question was like a bucket of cold water in Jamal Sterling's face. "What? What do you mean?" he stammered. That 20% was all Grandfather Theron had left her. He knew it. The family lawyer had confirmed it. Zendaya didn't answer him. She turned to Assistant Chen. Assistant Chen took the stand, bringing another black leather folder. He opened it and pulled out a sheaf of carefully sealed documents. "Gentlemen members of the Board of Directors," Assistant Chen said, his voice loud and clear. 3 years ago, the late Mr. Theron Sterling, before he died, made 2 wills and established 2 separate trusts. Jamal was stunned. 2 trusts? Absurd. There was only one. Diane screamed downstairs too. "It's true! That old man only made 1 trust. I saw the lawyer announce it with my own eyes." Assistant Chen ignored them. "The first trust," he continued, "contains the 20% of Sterling Group shares in the name of Mrs. Zendaya Vance. This is the public trust everyone knows." He held up the second sheaf of documents. The seal was from a Swiss bank, not a national bank. And this is the second trust, a secret trust established in Zurich, Switzerland. This trust holds 30% of Mr. Theron Sterling's personal shares in the group. The auditorium erupted. 30%! My God, how did we not know this? The old man concealed it so well. Jamal felt his legs weaken. 30% plus 20%, that was 51%. "No, it can't be! Why?" he screamed. "Why would grandfather do this? Why did he hide it?" "Because," Zendaya finally spoke, her voice cold, cutting through his scream. This 30% trust had a single activation condition. She looked directly into his eyes, every word a knife plunging into his heart. It would only be activated, and its total ownership transferred to me, Zendaya Vance, on the day that you, Jamal Sterling, his grandson, betrayed me. Silence gripped the auditorium. Betrayal. Jamal was speechless. Zendaya signaled to Attorney Knowles. The blonde lawyer stepped back up to the podium. "We present the evidence of betrayal." The large screen turned on again. It wasn't a video, but a series of photographs. Photos of Jamal and Kiana hugging and kissing at the restaurant. Photos of them holding hands in the luxury apartment lobby. Photos of him offering her the diamond necklace. And finally, the video of him deceiving her into signing the papers, and the video of him kicking her out of the house on the rainy night. According to the terms of the secret trust, Attorney Knowles said, the behavior of public adultery, fraud to obtain assets, and the violent expulsion of the wife from the home severely violated the protection clause. This evidence was sent to the Swiss bank the night Mrs. Zendaya Vance was expelled from the Sterling estate. Assistant Chen stepped onto the podium, brandishing a document with a red seal from a Swiss bank. "And here is the confirmation. Received at 1 o'clock this morning, the Swiss bank has officially released the trust." Zendaya took a step forward. She looked at him. "You deceived me to obtain an invalid 20% of shares, but it was that very act of fraud that activated the true 30% of shares." She turned to the shareholders. "Today, I, Zendaya Vance, am officially the owner of the 20% of shares from the first trust plus the 30% of shares from the second trust." She raised 5 fingers. "I," she declared, her voice resounding, "currently own 51% of the Sterling Group shares. I am the majority shareholder." Boom! Jamal fell to his knees. He couldn't take it anymore. He slumped heavily into the president's chair behind him. 51%. 51%. Not only had he lost the 20%, he had lost everything. He had, with his own hands, delivered the Sterling Group to the woman he most despised. "No, no, grandfather! Grandfather, how could you do this to me?" he screamed like a wounded animal. Beside him, Kiana's eyes widened and then rolled back. She fell backward, fainting. In the row below, Diahan couldn't withstand the shock either. She clutched her chest, staggered, and fainted on the spot, causing a small commotion, but no one cared. All eyes were on Zendaya Vance, the new queen of the Sterling Group. The final shock, 51%, had completely taken down Jamal Sterling. He was slumped in the president's chair, his gaze empty, muttering nonstop. 51%. 51%. Betrayal, grandfather. Betrayal. The confusion subsided in the audience. Diahan, who had genuinely fainted from the shock, was attended to by paramedics. Kiana, after falling backward, also remained motionless. But on the podium, Zendaya didn't even look at them. Their collapse was not her concern. She looked at Jamal, the man who had completely lost his mind, and turned away coldly. She took the microphone, her voice calm but powerful, drowning out all the noise. "Security, take Mrs. Sterling and Ms. Sorrell to the hospital. Do not let them disturb the meeting." Her voice had no emotion, as if she were ordering the disposal of 2 broken objects. "Gentlemen shareholders," she turned to the stunned crowd, "we have wasted too much time with this useless family drama. Now, let's get back to business." Jamal lifted his head. "Business? No. The Sterling Group is mine. You can't. Shut up." Mr. Hayes, the shareholder she had just humiliated, stood up and pointed his finger at him. "You no longer have that right. The Sterling Group belongs to the shareholders, not to a swindler like you." "It's true. You almost led us to ruin." Zendaya raised her hand. The auditorium immediately fell silent. All eyes were on her, their new savior, their new queen. She signaled to Attorney Knowles. The blonde lawyer stepped up to the podium. "I confirm that the Sullivan and Cromwell firm has verified and authenticated the documents from the Swiss bank. Mrs. Zendaya Vance is the legal and absolute owner of 51% of the voting shares of the Sterling Group. Her power is incontestable." Zendaya nodded. She looked at Jamal, who was being crushed by this reality. "Jamal Sterling, did you hear correctly?" she said. "Now it's my turn." She took a deep breath, her voice resonating in the microphone. "I, Zendaya Vance, in my capacity as the new chairperson of the board of directors and majority shareholder of the Sterling Group," she paused, looking directly at Jamal. "I officially propose a vote," she said, every word clear, "for the immediate removal of Jamal Sterling from the position of Chief Executive Officer, CEO. She gave him no time to react. Reasons: poor management, gravely erroneous investment decisions, fraud against shareholders, and use of illegal means to appropriate company assets. These behaviors have led the Sterling Group to the brink of bankruptcy." "No!" Jamal, like a wounded animal, jumped up, trying to move toward her. "You can't do this, you witch! The Sterling Group belongs to the Sterling family. You're just an abandoned wife. You have no right!" But before he could touch her, the group's security guards, the same ones who were receiving their salary from him an hour ago, immediately moved forward. They didn't stop Zendaya, they stopped him. "You!" Jamal was stunned. The shareholders in the audience began to act. They had seen a flicker of hope. Their only hope was this woman, Ariadna. "I agree." Mr. Hayes was the first to raise his hand. "The Sterling Group needs a competent leader, not a playboy who destroys family wealth. I vote for the removal of Jamal Sterling." "I agree too. Removal. We've endured him for too long." Even the shareholders who were Jamal's allies, who were also losing everything, rushed to raise their hands. They couldn't let their money be destroyed with him. We also agree with the removal." "Please, Attorney, proceed to count the votes," Zendaya said calmly. Attorney Knowles quickly did the math. "Madam Chair, excluding your 51% of shares, 98% of the shares present have voted in favor of the removal of Mr. Jamal Sterling from all his positions in the Sterling Group." "Very well." Zendaya looked at Jamal, who was being restrained by the guards, took the microphone, and pronounced the final sentence. "Jamal Sterling, you are fired." Those two words, "you are fired," shattered what was left of his sanity. His silence broke. He no longer shouted in rage, but in fear. "No, no!" He suddenly changed the way he addressed her. He struggled, trying to free himself from the guards, not to attack her, but to beg her. "Zendaya, you can't do this to me. I'm your husband, Zendaya." But Zendaya Vance had already turned her back on him. Despair turned into madness. "Witch! Viper! I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" He tried to move forward madly, but the guards overpowered him. "Take him out of here," Zendaya ordered without turning around. "Yes, Madam Chair." Two burly guards grabbed Jamal and dragged him away. He, like a wounded animal, struggled and screamed wildly. He was dragged down the central aisle, passing hundreds of pairs of eyes that looked at him with contempt and satisfaction. As he was being dragged toward the door, he struggled one last time, turning his head to look at her. The woman in the white suit, standing imposingly on the podium. Now he no longer shouted insults. He shouted her name, a desolate cry, full of regret and despair. "Zendaya! Zendaya Vance! I was wrong! Forgive me! I was the one who was wrong, Zendaya!" The heavy wooden door closed hard, cutting off his screams. The auditorium fell silent. Zendaya Vance, standing on the podium, closed her eyes for a second. She took a deep breath. 3 years had ended. She opened her eyes, her gaze sharp again. "Assistant Chen, clean up this mess. Gentlemen shareholders," she looked at the crowd. "The Sterling Group restructuring meeting officially begins now." As Jamal was being dragged away, the confusion in the audience quickly resolved. Diahan, who had truly passed out from the shock, was taken away by paramedics. Only Kiana Sorrell remained. She hadn't fainted. She was just paralyzed by the shock. But upon hearing Jamal being taken away, her survival instinct kicked in. She realized Jamal was finished. The Sterling family was ruined. She had nowhere to turn. She had to flee. While all attention was focused on Zendaya, who began her restructuring speech, Kiana quietly got up, took off her heels, removed her suit jacket, and tried to blend into the crowd of panicked employees by the side door. She knew where to go, the underground garage. Her Maserati was still there. The diamond jewelry Jamal had given her, the credit cards. She had to flee Atlanta, flee the country. She ran toward the emergency elevator, pressing the button for the -2 level. Her heart pounded uncontrollably. Fast, fast. The elevator door opened. The underground garage was deserted. She ran like a madwoman toward her red sports car, tremblingly searching for the keys in her purse. "Here they are!" she exclaimed, pressing the unlock button. Just as she opened the car door to get in, whoosh! 2 bright headlights from the opposite side illuminated her face, blinding her. A black Bentley Mulsanne was silently parked there, blocking her exit. The Bentley door opened. Zendaya Vance stepped out. If the white suit in the auditorium represented power, the black suit she was wearing now was the death sentence. She had changed clothes right after the end of the first part of the meeting. "Ms. Sorrell," Zendaya's voice resonated in the empty garage, "where are you going in such a hurry?" Kiana slammed the car door shut and backed away, her back hitting the Maserati. "Excuse me, President Vance," she stammered, changing her address. "I wasn't feeling well. I wanted to go home to rest." "Home?" Zendaya walked closer slowly, her heels clicking with increasing pressure. "Do you think after today you still have a home to return to?" Kiana couldn't fake it anymore. She abruptly changed tactics, falling to her knees on the ground and crawling toward Zendaya, tears streaming. "Zendaya, I was wrong. I know I was wrong." She clung to Zendaya's legs. "I was stupid. I was blinded by the money. It was all Jamal's fault. He forced me. He said if I didn't help him, he would fire me," she cried hysterically. "Forgive me. Please, we are both women. Forgive me." Zendaya looked with disgust at the woman clinging to her legs. She kicked her away. "Ms. Sorrell, your performance is even worse than mine." Seeing that begging wasn't working, Kiana used her last resort. She suddenly stood up, her hand on her belly. "You can't do anything to me," she shouted. "I'm pregnant. I'm pregnant with Jamal Sterling's son, the Sterling family heir. The baby is innocent. If you harm me, you're killing a person." She thought Zendaya, being a woman, wouldn't dare harm a child. Hearing this, Zendaya didn't look surprised. Instead, she smiled, a smile that sent a shiver down Kiana's spine. "Pregnant," Zendaya said. "You say you are pregnant with Jamal Sterling's son?" "Yes, he's the baby's father. Don't you believe me?" "I believe you are pregnant," Zendaya said, "but I don't believe it's Jamal Sterling's child." Zendaya signaled. Assistant Chen stepped out of the car and handed Kiana a folder. "Open it and see," Zendaya ordered. Kiana opened the folder, trembling. It was a medical report from a private hospital in Atlanta. Patient, Jamal Sterling. Date, 6 months ago. She read to the conclusion. Sperm analysis. Result, azospermia. Diagnosis, infertility, splat. The folder fell from Kiana's hands. She staggered. No, it can't be. Infertility? No, the doctor said he was fine." Zendaya laughed disdainfully. "Yes, because the real report was intercepted by me 6 months ago. The report he received was one I falsified." "You?" Kiana looked at Zendaya in horror. "Why did you do that?" "To wait for today," Zendaya said. "To see how you and his mother would act out the farce of the heir." She paused. "Now, Ms. Sorrell, whose child is it in your belly? Do you want me to investigate that for you?" Kiana collapsed. She knew Jamal was, in fact, infertile. The baby belonged to another man she was sleeping with. "But," Zendaya continued, "who you sleep with doesn't interest me. What interests me is this." Assistant Chen presented a second, much thicker folder. 3 years, Zendaya said. In your capacity as executive assistant to the CEO, you abused your position to receive bribes and commissions from at least 12 different vendors. You created a phantom account in the Cayman Islands to launder that money. Zendaya looked at her nails. Total value, $8.3 million. Ms. Sorrell, this amount is enough to send you to jail for 10-15 years. Kiana was completely paralyzed. How? How do you know? It's a secret account. I am Ariadna, Zendaya said simply. No account is secret to me. What? What are you going to do? Kiana whispered, her voice full of despair. Zendaya didn't answer. She only looked behind Kiana. Police sirens sounded in the distance and then grew closer. 2 police cars entered the garage and stopped beside them. 4 uniformed officers stepped out. Kiana Sorrell, a senior officer said. Kiana turned, her face devoid of color. We received a complaint accompanied by complete evidence. You are under arrest on suspicion of embezzlement and money laundering. Please, come with us. No. Kiana shook her head madly. It's a lie. Zendaya Vance, you are slandering me. She tried to flee, but 2 officers overpowered her and immediately handcuffed her. Poisonous witch! Kiana screamed at Zendaya. You won't have peace. Jamal won't forgive you. Jamal? Zendaya walked closer and whispered in her ear. He can barely save himself. Oh, I forgot to tell you. She looked at her and smiled. That slap you gave me on the rainy night, I'll make sure you remember it every day for the next 10 years in jail. Kiana was stunned and then screamed madly as they led her to the police car. Zendaya watched the police car drive away with its sirens on. She returned to her Bentley. Assistant Chen, back to the company. We still have a lot of work to do. The news of the Sterling Group General Meeting exploded in all the media, not just in Atlanta, but worldwide. Ariadna revealed, the abused wife is the genius. Illiterate wife takes control of $1 million group after speech in 5 languages. CEO Jay Sterling arrested on suspicion of fraud. Assistant arrested for embezzlement. The Sterling Group stock was still suspended. Creditors, investors, and all employees held their breath. They had witnessed a spectacular revenge, but now they needed a leader, not an actress. They needed to know if the Sterling Group would survive or die. Zendaya didn't give them time to doubt. That very afternoon, while Jamal and Kiana were still at the police station, Zendaya got to work. First act, paying the debt. She convened an emergency meeting with the international creditors. Director Schmidt of Deutsche Bank, the VP of JP Morgan, and the representatives from Japan and France were present in the meeting room. The atmosphere was still tense. Ms. Ariadna, or should I say President Vance, Director Schmidt began. We are very impressed, but impression doesn't pay debts. The Sterling Group still owes us $50 million that are due tomorrow. The other investors nodded. They respected her, but they were businessmen. Zendaya remained calm. I understand. Assistant Chen. Assistant Chen connected his computer to the projector. Gentlemen, 1 hour ago, Ariadna Capital, on behalf of the Sterling Group, liquidated the entire $50 million debt to Deutsche Bank. The debt is settled. What? Director Schmidt was stunned. He immediately called Berlin. Seconds later, he looked at Zendaya in disbelief. The money is in the account. You used your personal money. I won't let the Sterling Group go bankrupt over an insignificant debt, Zendaya said. I said I was going to inject capital. The immediate debt crisis is resolved. Second act, renegotiating. Now, Zendaya said, that the debt is resolved, let's talk about the future. She stood up and began walking around the table. She didn't need papers. She spoke in English to JP Morgan. The European project is terminated. All toxic assets will be liquidated in 48 hours. My team has already found a buyer. We will recover 30% of the capital instead of losing it all. She spoke in German to Schmidt. I will not cancel the contract. On the contrary, I will double the investment, but not in biotechnology. We will focus on the Sterling Group's core business, next-generation semiconductor materials. Here is my projection model. She spoke in Japanese to Nomura. Your orders will be reinstated on the condition of a 5-year exclusivity contract. I guarantee Ariadne's quality, not Jamal Sterling's quality." A week later, after a week of frantic work, Zendaya practically lived in the CEO's office. She conducted a bloody purge. Jamal Sterling's entire faction, from the old incompetent CFO to the flattering human resources head, along with the useless middle managers, were all fired in a single day. She replaced them with Ariadne Capital's elite team. A breath of fresh, efficient, relentless, and absolutely loyal air was injected into the rotten Sterling Group machine. She cut all the luxury and vanity projects Jamal had created to show off, including the fashion division, which was sold at a bargain price to recover capital. The following Monday, the Sterling Group shares returned to trading on the Atlanta Stock Exchange. 9:30 a.m., market open. There were no panic sales. A massive buy order, then another. JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Nomura. All international investors, after a week of working with Ariadne, issued statements increasing the group's credit rating, reinvesting, and expressing confidence in the new leadership. Small investors woke up. Ariadne is in charge. Buy now. The Sterling Group stock shot up from the bottom of the pit, hitting its maximum daily limit. The next day, another limit. The day after, another. In just 1 week, the Sterling Group was not only saved, but it was stronger than ever. Its market capitalization even exceeded the peak of Grandfather Theron's era. And on newsstands worldwide, a cold, beautiful blackface appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine. The image of Zendaya Vance in a white suit in the CEO's office, looking out over the Atlanta skyline. The headline, "Humiliated Wife is Queen of Finance. The incredible story of Ariadne." She had recovered everything. At the same time that Zendaya Vance ascended to the pinnacle of fame, others were cast to the bottom of society. Diane woke up in the hospital. The shock of losing 51% of the shares and that the Sterling family no longer belonged to her almost caused a stroke. But the worst was yet to come. When she tried to call her son, the call wasn't answered. She called the butler at the estate. "Hello, Manuel. Prepare the car to come pick me up. I want to go home." On the other side, there was a moment of silence. "Mrs. Diane, I've been fired. President Vance has fired all the old employees." "What?" Diane was stunned. "And you can't come back either," Manuel said, his voice full of fear. "The new president's security guards have sealed the mansion. They say the property belongs to the company. It's the residence of the acting CEO. You no longer have the right to be there." "Lies!" Diane screamed. "That is the Sterling family's house." "No, ma'am. It was bought with group money." The call was cut off. Diane panicked. She tried to pay the hospital bill with her credit card. "Card blocked," the nurse said. "Blocked? Impossible! I have millions." "Ma'am, your card is an additional card associated with Mr. Jamal Sterling's account. All of Mr. Sterling's assets have been frozen by the court for the fraud investigation. Your card has also been deactivated." Diane was paralyzed. No home, no money, no son. From a rich lady, she had become homeless in a single day. She had no other option. Pride, arrogance, it all dissolved before the raw reality. She took a taxi, lying to the driver that she had forgotten her wallet, and went to the Sterling Tower. She burst into the lobby, now bright and tidy under the new security team's management. "I want to see Zendaya Vance! I am her mother-in-law! Let me in!" she screamed, disheveled and looking miserable. The new guards, who didn't know her, blocked her. "Ma'am, you don't have an appointment. Please step back." "How dare you! I am Mrs. Sterling!" The commotion reached the ears of the president's office on the 68th floor. Zendaya's new secretary looked at the security monitor. "President Vance, there's an elderly woman causing a disturbance in the lobby. She says she's the former CEO's mother." Zendaya, who was analyzing a financial report, lifted her head. Her gaze chilled. "Let her come up. Meeting room number 3. 10 minutes later, Diane was taken to the 68th floor. She was pushed inside the CEO's office and the door closed. She had been in this office many times, but today it seemed strange. Cold, minimalist, and powerful. And sitting behind her son's enormous desk was Zendaya Vance. As soon as she saw Zendaya, Diane stopped screaming. She knew this was her last hope. She rushed toward her, but didn't dare get too close to the desk. Boom! She knelt on the floor. "Zendaya!" she cried, tears mixing with mucus. "My daughter-in-law! Mommy! Mommy was wrong! I'm a stupid old woman! I beg your forgiveness!" Zendaya calmly turned the page of the report without lifting her head. "Mrs. Sterling, what did you call me?" "Daughter-in-law! You are the daughter-in-law of the Sterling family. You are still Jamal's wife." Diane crawled, trying to grab the table leg. "I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I deserve to die. Hit me, insult me, but please, please have mercy." Mercy. Zendaya finally put down her pen and lifted her head, her gaze cold as ice. "Please save the Sterling family," Diane implored. "Save Jamal. He is your husband. He was just blinded by that witch Kiana. He still loves you, Zendaya. He's innocent. Save him. Withdraw the complaint. Get Jamal out of jail. He's my only son. He can't go to jail. Please, the mansion, let me go back. I can't live on the street." Zendaya stood up, slowly walked around the desk, and stopped in front of the woman kneeling at her feet. "Daughter-in-law." Her voice was light, but it made Diane tremble. "Mrs. Sterling, did you ever, even for 1 second, consider me your daughter-in-law?" Diane was speechless. 3 years, Zendaya crouched down, looking her directly in the eyes. "You called me useless. You called me barren. You called me illiterate. You threw a boiling teacup at me. You forced me to kneel and clean the floor when I had a fever. You watched me be humiliated by your son, ridiculed by his mistress, and you still applauded. Diane was trembling. "Do you remember the phrase you said most often?" Zendaya smiled. "You said, 'Just looking at you gets on my nerves.'" Diane stared at her in horror. "What a coincidence!" Zendaya straightened up. "Right now, this illiterate is sitting in your son's place, and Mrs. Sterling, seeing you kneeling at my feet," she shook her head, "I also feel very irritated." "As for Jamal," she said, turning away, "he swindled me. He falsified documents. My lawyers will ensure he receives the punishment he deserves. He will pay. As for the Sterling family," she looked out the window, "it fell apart the day he decided to trick me into signing those papers." She pressed a button on the secretary's phone. "Security." 2 burly guards immediately entered. "Take this woman out," Zendaya ordered without looking at her again, "and put her on the blacklist. Make sure she never steps foot in this building again." "Yes, President Vance." "No, Zendaya! Viper!" Diane, seeing that pleading was useless, lashed out. "You won't have a good end, animal. You stole everything from the Sterling family. You're bad luck." She was dragged out, her insults echoing down the hallway. Zendaya turned and calmly took a sip of coffee. Forgiveness. She had never considered that word. Jamal Sterling was not immediately imprisoned. His fraud against Zendaya, though clear, was a complex civil property case. However, the falsification of financial reports to deceive shareholders and international investors that Zendaya exposed was a serious economic crime. He was prohibited from leaving the country. All his personal assets, bank accounts, credit cards, cars, houses, were frozen for the investigation. From a multimillionaire CEO, he became a man without a penny in a single morning. He was expelled from the Sterling Tower and wandered the streets of Atlanta. He still wore his expensive suit, but his gaze was completely vacant. He tried to call his closest friends, the business partners he used to drink with. "Hello, Mr. Silva. It's Jamal." Click. "Hello, Mr. Costa. Help me, please. The number you are calling is not available." No one answered. He was a plague now. Anyone who got close to him would be noted by Zendaya Vance, by Ariadna. No one dared to risk it. He didn't know his mother had been kicked out of the hospital. He didn't know Kiana had been handcuffed. He only knew he had lost everything. He walked aimlessly. He went to the luxury apartment he had bought for Kiana, where they had spent so many passionate nights. Sealed. He went to the Buckhead mansion where he grew up. Sealed. The Atlanta sky began to drizzle. The cold November rain. He remembered that night it also rained like this, and he had kicked out Zendaya. He had laughed at her, called her useless. He laughed, a crazy, sobbing laugh in the middle of the street. Useless. Illiterate. He was the blind one. He was the useless one. He entered a convenience store. He used the last money left in his wallet, which the investigation team hadn't even bothered to take. He didn't buy bread, he bought alcohol. A bottle of cheap whiskey, the kind he would have once thought too dirty even to wash his hands with. He sat down in a dirty alley and drank. The whiskey burned his throat, but not as much as the truth. He drank. He drank to forget the 5 languages. He drank to forget the look of contempt from the entire auditorium. He drank to forget the truth that he had been deceived by one woman for 3 years. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. He wandered like a ghost, his suit, now wrinkled, stained with mud, and smelling of alcohol, his beard and hair unkempt, was indistinguishable from a beggar's. On the 3rd night, he drank the last bottle. He was drunk, seeing the world spin. He stumbled out of the alley with a single thought in his head. He had to go to the Sterling Tower. He had to see her. He had to ask her why. Why was she so cruel? He staggered into the middle of the road. Horns, blinding lights, crash. A delivery truck, unable to brake in time, hit him head on. He flew through the air and fell hard onto the cold asphalt. Fresh blood mixed with the rainwater. Before losing consciousness, the last image he saw was not Kiana or his mother, but Zendaya Vance, imposing in her white suit. When Jamal Sterling woke up, he smelled disinfectant. He opened his eyes. The ceiling was white. It was a hospital, but not a VIP room like the ones he frequented. It was a noisy, communal ward with at least 6 beds. He tried to sit up, but an agonizing pain struck his right leg. He screamed, looked down, and couldn't believe what he saw. The part of the sheet from his right knee down was completely smooth, empty. No. He frantically pulled at the sheet. His right leg was gone. Only a white, blood-stained, bandaged stump remained. A nurse rushed over to him. "You just woke up and you're already screaming? Be lucky you're alive." "My leg, where is my leg?" He grabbed the nurse's arm, shouting, "What leg?" The nurse pushed him away. "It was crushed by a truck. If we hadn't amputated it, how were we going to save you? You would have died from an infection." "No, the doctor! Call the doctor! Put it back! Put it back!" "Are you crazy?" The nurse looked at him as if he were a monster. "It was minced meat. How were we going to put it back?" At that moment, the old television hung in the corner of the ward was broadcasting the morning financial news. The new president of the Sterling Group, Mrs. Zendaya Vance, also known as Ariadna, has officially announced the restructuring plan today. The group's shares are predicted to hit the maximum limit in tomorrow's session. The image of Zendaya, beautiful, cold, powerful, appeared on the screen. Jamal stared at the television, then looked at his stump. He had lost the Sterling Group. He had lost his fortune. He had lost his mother. He had lost his mistress, and now he had lost a leg. He had become crippled. He could no longer shout. He only emitted sounds of desperation. He realized it was his punishment, the punishment for his 3 years of arrogance and cruelty. He slumped onto the bed, tears streaming. He had indeed lost everything. 2 months later, Jamal Sterling was discharged from the hospital. He had no money to pay the bill. The hospital itself had to resort to a charity institution to settle it. He received a prosthetic limb, the cheapest, roughest, and heaviest one. He learned that his mother, after being expelled, had gone mad. She wandered the port, telling everyone she was Mrs. Sterling, and ended up being admitted to a psychiatric hospital. Kiana, with irrefutable evidence of embezzlement and the exposed pregnancy farce, was quickly sentenced to 8 years in prison. Jamal Sterling was now completely alone. He lived in a rented room, the cheapest, in a poor neighborhood, less than 100 square feet. Every day he washed dishes in a small restaurant to survive. With every step, the prosthesis rubbed his stump, causing sharp pain. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the pain in his soul. He regretted it. Regret tormented him every night. He didn't regret losing the money. He regretted not having realized. He had had a treasure by his side for 3 years, a woman so intelligent, talented, and patient. He could have had everything, but he himself threw it all away. He called that treasure garbage. Today, he received his dishwasher's pay. He didn't buy alcohol. He bought clean clothes, albeit from a thrift store. He shaved, dragged his prosthesis, took a bus, and went to the Sterling Tower. The building was the same, but the atmosphere was completely different. Bright, modern, and cold. New guards, young and efficient, guarded the entrance. He tried to enter. "Stop!" A guard cut him off. "Who are you looking for?" I want to see the president. I am..." He hesitated. "Do you have an appointment?" The guard looked at him suspiciously. "No, but please tell her that Jamal Sterling wants to see her." The guard frowned. "That name sounds familiar. Ah, the former CEO who was fired. The president isn't in. Get lost." The guard waved his hand. "No, she is here, I know it," he shouted. "Please, I just want to see her." He tried to force his way in, but was immediately tackled by 2 guards. His prosthesis hit the stone floor with a dry sound. "Get out of here, beggar! If you keep causing trouble, we'll call the police!" Jamal lay on the ground. This humiliation was worse than losing his leg. He knew he wouldn't be able to get in. He dragged himself outside and stopped in front of the main entrance. And then he did something he never thought he would do in his life. He knelt. He knelt on the cold granite in front of the main entrance of the Sterling Tower. He knelt with one real knee and one prosthesis. Everyone who passed looked at him, pointed, whispered. "Isn't that Jamal Sterling? My God, what a disgrace. They say he's crippled. Now he's come to beg." He didn't care. He just stayed there kneeling, looking at the revolving door. He knelt from noon until evening. The sky began to darken. In the CEO's office on the 68th floor, Assistant Chen reported, "President Vance, he's been kneeling out there for 6 hours." Zendaya was analyzing a contract. She didn't lift her head. "Is it raining yet?" "No, ma'am, but rain is forecast shortly." "Let him in. Meeting room number 3. 10 minutes later, Jamal was brought inside. He was trembling from the cold and nerves. The room door opened. Zendaya Vance entered. She wore a dark blue silk dress, her aura noble. She sat in the opposite chair, separated by a long table. Jamal saw her, and his eyes filled with tears. He didn't sit. He staggered and knelt by the table. He cried the tears of a man who has lost everything. "I was wrong. I know I was wrong." He banged his head against the floor. "It was all my fault. I was stupid. I was arrogant. I'm not a human being. I love you, Zendaya." He lifted his head, his face covered in tears. "You know, for the past 3 years, I tried to hate you. I tried to ignore you, but I couldn't stop noticing you. I was jealous seeing you alone in the attic. I got angry because you never asked me for anything. It was Kiana who blinded me. That witch put a spell on me. She spoke ill of you every day. I was deceived by her." He tried to move closer, wanting to touch her. "Forgive me, Zendaya. Let's start over. Yes, I lost a leg. I've been punished. Look how miserable I am. Forgive me." Zendaya listened in silence. She didn't interrupt him. Only when he had no more tears to cry did she slowly speak. Her voice was calm, without any waver. "You love me?" She laughed. A soft laugh that froze Jamal. "You love me, Jamal Sterling? Is that why you called me a useless illiterate?" He shook his head. "You love me," she continued. "Is that why you tricked me into signing over all my assets to your mistress? You love me?" Her voice chilled. "Is that why, right after getting what you wanted, you threw me out of the house on a rainy night, threw the divorce papers at me and said, 'You're useless now'? You love me?" She looked directly into his eyes. Is that why, when you needed me to act to save the group, you went to that cheap motel and used money to give me orders? Every sentence from her was like a knife plunging into his already shattered heart. Zendaya Sterling stood up and looked down at him. Your love is disgusting. Don't blame Kiana. She was just a catalyst. The cruelty, the arrogance, the stupidity are your essence. She turned away. I didn't come here to hear your repentance. Your repentance has no value to me. No, Zendaya, don't go, he cried. He crawled, trying to embrace her legs. Zendaya, don't go. I beg you. I know you still have feelings for the Sterling family. You owe it to Grandfather. Grandfather saved your life. You can't be so cruel. He thought this was his last triumph, the debt of gratitude to Grandfather Theron. He was wrong. This was the last taboo. Zendaya stopped, turned abruptly. She didn't slap him, but her gaze hurt more. You dare to mention Grandfather? Her voice was no longer calm. It trembled with rage. For the first time, he saw her angry. Who do you think I am? She snarled. A fool who endures everything for love? Do you know why I stayed in the Sterling house for 3 years enduring your humiliation and your mother's? Do you think I couldn't leave? Do you think I didn't have money? Jamal was paralyzed. No. Why? Because I owed Grandfather Sterling a life, she said, her voice sharp as a blade. Because I promised him before he died. Promised what? Your grandfather knew what kind of person you were. He knew you were arrogant, stupid, and blinded by prejudice. He knew you would despise me. Zendaya closed her eyes, remembering the scene. He took my hand and told me, Zendaya, give him 3 years. 3 years for him to prove himself worthy. If, after 3 years, he recognizes your worth, learns to appreciate you, then use your talent to work with him and grow the Sterling Group. The entirety of this 51% of shares will be yours. Jamal was stunned. He said that? Yes. Zendaya opened her eyes. And he also said, if, after 3 years, he is still stupid, if he betrays you, then Zendaya, you owe him nothing. Take it all back. Show no mercy. Those 3 years, Zendaya pointed directly at him. Those 3 years were your test, the only chance Grandfather Sterling gave you. I waited. I was patient. I gave you countless opportunities to see me, but what did you do? You called me illiterate, you betrayed me, and finally you tricked me into signing papers. She laughed coldly. You failed your grandfather's test miserably. You threw away your only chance with your own hands. Jamal completely collapsed. He finally understood. He hadn't lost the Sterling Group because of her. He had lost it because of himself. No. He shook his head, unable to accept the cruel truth. Zendaya didn't want to waste another second. She returned to the table. Assistant Chen, who had been by the door the entire time, entered and placed a folder on the table. Today, Zendaya said coldly, I called you here to resolve the final matter. She picked up the folder and threw it in Jamal's face. The papers scattered around him. Divorce papers. He picked up a sheet, trembling. Divorce papers prepared by the best legal team. Sign it. Her voice held no emotion. Jamal looked at the paper. Divorce. The definitive endpoint. No! He suddenly screamed, crumpling the paper. I won't sign. I won't divorce you. You are my wife. You will be my wife forever. I've lost everything. I can't lose you. I won't sign. He started to become frantic. If I don't sign, you'll be Mrs. Sterling forever. Forever tied to me. I'll never let you go. His unreciprocated regret transformed into a final act of selfishness and tyranny. Zendaya looked at him with disgust. Do you think, she said slowly, that you have a right to choose? She looked at Assistant Chen. Read to him. Assistant Chen picked up another copy and read coldly. Mr. Jamal Sterling has 2 options. 1, sign this mutual divorce agreement. Mrs. Zendaya Vance, in final consideration of your grandfather, will not sue you for the enormous hospital debt and will not sue you for psychological abuse." He paused. 2. You do not sign, Zendaya continued. I will immediately file a unilateral divorce petition with the Atlanta court. Do you think that with the video of the fraud, with the evidence of your adultery with Kiana Sorrell, with your mother's testimony about the humiliations, the court won't grant me the divorce? She bent down. You will be divorced in ignominy, Jamal Sterling, and I will ensure that all the debts, all the crimes, including the defamation in the lobby, are added up. Not only will you not have a penny, but you will go to jail for debt. Jamal was paralyzed. His madness disappeared. He knew she wasn't joking. He knew Ariadne could do that. Sign. Be a free, poor cripple. Don't sign. Be a poor cripple in jail. He had lost completely. He trembled. The pen! His voice was hoarse. Assistant Chen put a pen on the table. Jamal crawled over there. He picked up the crumpled papers, trying to smooth them out. His hand trembled so much he could barely hold the pen. He had to use both hands. After more than a dozen attempts, he managed to write the 3 words Jamal O. Sterling on the signature line. The handwriting was an ugly scrawl. After signing, the pen fell to the floor. He buried his face in the table and cried like a child, a desolate, pitiful wail. Zendaya picked up the signed divorce papers, looked at his signature, then at the false signature she had made on the transfer contract. A complete relief. She turned and walked out without looking back. Security, she said into the phone. Escort our guest out. 1 year later, the Sterling Group no longer existed. Zendaya Vance restructured it, merged it with her fund, and renamed it Ariadne Global Group. It was no longer just a materials company. Under her leadership, it became a multinational financial and technological empire with influence from Atlanta to New York, from Berlin to Singapore. The name Ariadne was no longer a mystery, but a living legend in the business world. Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum, where the planet's most powerful and wealthiest minds gather. In the main auditorium, Zendaya Vance sat on the stage. She wore an emerald green silk dress, her hair pulled into an elegant high bun, poised and imposing. She sat between a president and a Nobel laureate in economics. She spoke in perfect English about the future of quantum finance and artificial intelligence. We cannot predict the future, but we can create it. Patience, preparation, and the courage to break old prejudices are the key. Her intelligent and incisive words were applauded by the entire auditorium. Thousands of world leaders stood up to applaud. She smiled, a confident, radiant smile, and bowed her head in thanks. At the same time, in a poor, dirty neighborhood in Atlanta, on a night of light rain, inside a small, foul-smelling restaurant with only a few customers, in the darkest corner sat Jamal Sterling. He was skeletal, his hair and beard streaked with white, his face sunken and full of wrinkles. He had aged 20 years in just one. He had only one leg, his torn clothes smelled foul. He had just washed a stack of dishes, and this was his dinner, a bowl of soup a customer had left behind. The old 14-inch static-filled television hung on the wall, broadcasting the international financial news. And the star of Davos this year is undoubtedly Mrs. Zendaya Vance, president of the Ariadne Global Group, the woman known as the Ariadne Miracle, who has redefined the Asian financial market. Jamal, who was bringing the spoon to his mouth, stopped. He slowly lifted his head. Through the static-filled screen, he saw her. Beautiful, radiant, standing on a world stage, being applauded by the entire world. She was in Davos. He was in a dirty restaurant. He was eating leftovers. He was crippled. She was in paradise. He was in hell. He watched her smile on the television. That smile should have been his. That success. He should have had half of it. Ah, ah. He tried to make a sound. The bowl in his hand trembled. Regret was no longer a feeling. It was a physical monster devouring his insides. He looked at her on the television and then at his bowl of leftovers. The contrast destroyed what was left of his sanity. Crash! He hurled the bowl against the wall. The dirty broth scattered. "Crippled, crippled," he screamed. A scream that was not human. It was the cry of an eternally condemned soul, a cry of absolute regret, madness, and despair. The restaurant owner came running. "Are you crazy? Get out! Get out of here!" He was thrown into the street, falling into a puddle of dirty water. He stayed there, curled up, screaming and crying in the rain. At the same time, in Davos, Zendaya Vance finished her speech, exited the auditorium, and went to a windy balcony. The Swiss air was clean and cold. The sky was full of stars. Majestic, snow-covered mountains surrounded her. She took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill her lungs. Her revenge against Jamal Sterling was complete. She didn't know. She no longer cared about him at all. Whether he lived or died, whether he repented or went mad, it no longer had any meaning for her. Forgiveness. She never thought about it. The best punishment was oblivion. She looked at the vast Swiss sky. She remembered Grandfather Theron. "Grandfather, I did it." She smiled, a genuine smile of relief and serenity. She was free. Did you like the story, and which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.